So I will call the special meeting of the New York State Cemetery Board to order. We have one agenda item, and I'll introduce myself as Mark Pattison. I am the designee for new Secretary of State Walter Mosley, just we confirmed yesterday.
Thomas Fuller, representing Dr. James McDonald as Commissioner of Health.
Okay. And Jill has personal in friends graduation of a child, college graduation, so she's not here. So we'll just have to muddle on without her. Right? Louis or Rob, would you like to introduce the agenda item?
Certainly. Okay, so the Cemetery Board last met on this matter on March 26th. Pinelawn Cemetery proposes to lease about 100 acres to Bristol Suffolk LLC and permit Bristol Suffolk to construct a technology park of 9 buildings totaling approximately 1.6 million square feet and associated improvements. Bristol Suffolk proposes to subdivide about 100 acres from a 111 acre lot and rezone it to permit these uses. The town of Babylon has issued a letter to the Cemetery Board in which it sought the agency's status and sought the Cemetery Board's input and jurisdiction on March 26th. The Cemetery Board resolved that it did not object to the town assuming lead agency's status, expressed its jurisdiction, and provided initial thoughts on the action. On April 17th, the town of Babylon, as lead agency, published in the Environmental Notice Bulletin that it had determined the proposed action may have a significant adverse impact on the environment and issued a positive declaration. On May 13th, the division received the correspondence from the town included in today's materials, seeking the Cemetery Board's input on a draft scope for the draft environmental impact statement. The town also posted a notice on May 22nd in the Environmental Notice Bulletin that the draft scope is available from the town to the public. A bit of a background.
Okay.
The draft scope is like a table of contents for the draft environmental impact statement. The scope outlines the topics and analyses of potential impacts of an action that will be addressed in the draft environmental impact statement. Involved agencies like the Cemetery Board provide lead agencies with written comments identifying their jurisdictions and issues or concerns that should be addressed in the draft EIS. The town must include reasonable informational needs identified by involved agencies in the final scope. The town has requested the Cemetery Board's comments by May 29th, and the town should provide a final scope to the project sponsor within 60 days of its receipt of the draft scope. So we are trying to work within that time frame that the town provided to us. Generally speaking, the division and I worked through a proposed resolution for the board to consider. That proposed resolution really focuses on 2 primary issues. One, ensuring that potential impacts on cemetery internment areas are in both proposed Lot 2. Those are cemetery interments in the 111 acre lot that will be subdivided or proposed to be subdivided. And also in interment areas west, adjacent to the project, west of Little East Neck Road, so across the road as well. And 2, when considering the economic impacts of the project, that the draft EIS also considered the positive economic impacts potentially available through this project to the cemetery, its lot owners, and the town as well. Those are really the 2 buckets that the resolution seeks to address in providing essentially what are line edits to the draft scope of work. Do either of you have any questions of myself or division?
Anything to add, Louis? All right. No, I just, in summary, we're, again, we have interests. We're participating as an interested party. We've involved party, and trying to make sure that the town of Babylon addresses those in their scope of work. Right? So okay. So I don't know if you have any other questions. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this, inform the board of anything in particular? Online, is there anyone online that wishes to address the board in this regard? I will note there's some people whose line is not muted. If you're not speaking, please mute your line. There's just a little bit of background. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board on this matter?
Sure, David Fleming from the Featherstone firm, representing Pine Lawn. I would just thank the board for, well, really two things. Quickly turning around the comments and making them available to the town within the required period. I appreciate that that requires special meetings, so thank you for doing that. And also from just our general review of the comments, one of the issues that stands out most significantly relates to the traffic study, which is our understanding the town's going to require a comprehensive traffic study of the entire area, which I think would take into account the board's issues. So, but that's all I have for now. Thank you.
On the subject of the traffic study, just to maybe clarify a little bit one thing. We've added references to what goes on west of Little East Neck Road in our proposed comments. That can encompass a very large area, so I just want to make clear. The project is happening east of Little East Neck Road, presumably. There are parts of the cemetery that are just across the road from it, and then there are parts of the cemetery that are west of Little East Neck Road, but 2 miles away from where any work is going to be done. Obviously, the impacts will be different in those different areas. And we're using the geographic phrase as a catch term in what we've highlighted, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all impacts in every inch of the cemetery west of that road is going to be the same. And we would expect that the draft EIS would take that into account.
And we say so.
We specify adjacency for the cemetery internment areas when we say west of Little East Neck Road. So I mean, Lewis is right from a geographic standpoint. I don't think in drafting this we're trying to replicate Manifest Destiny, and that west is on and forevermore.
Wow, very nice.
Thank you, thank you. I like to look at colonial maps sometimes. Okay, if the cemetery board would indulge me in reading the proposed resolution.
If you want, yeah.
Okay. All right. Gonna take a minute. Okay. Whereas Pine Lawn Memorial Park and Arboretum, the cemetery, proposes to lease 114 acres of land to Bristol Suffolk LLC to construct an industrial technology park consisting of 9 buildings totaling 1,617,471 square feet, and associated site improvements, and subdivide and rezone 114 acres from 111.394 acres lot to Planned Industrial Park 2, the proposal. And whereas on about April 17th, 2024, the Town of Babylon Town Board, the town, as lead agency, determined that the proposal may have significant adverse impact on the environment, and a draft environmental impact statement, DEIS, must be prepared. And whereas the cemetery board has received a letter dated May 8th, 2024, draft scoping document and associated materials from the town, in which the town seeks the cemetery board's comments on a draft scoping document for the DEIS. And whereas the cemetery board has reviewed the town's letter, draft scoping document, and associated materials pursuant to Article 8 of the Environmental Conservation Law, Article 15 of the Not-for-Profit Corporation Law, and their implementing regulations. Now therefore, be it resolved that the cemetery board offers the following comments on the draft scoping documents, with proposed additions underlined and proposed deletions struck through. Number 1, in section 2.3, page 5, in the table listing New York State Department of State Division of Cemetery Board, the associated row stating lease approval should also include major alteration application approval. Number 2, in section 3.1, impacts on aesthetic resources, page 7, the potential impact on cemetery operation should not be limited to proposed lot 2, but should encompass all adjacent cemetery operations. The cemetery board recommends, quote, the proposed action may be visible from publicly accessible vantage points during routine travel by residents, including travel to and from work, or view from adjacent areas of cemetery interments west of proposed action across Little East Neck Road and from proposed lot 2. The project is to be developed in the most aesthetically pleasing manner with preservation of existing buffer and vegetation and placement of additional buffers and vegetation to the greatest extent practicable. Number 3, in section 3.1, impacts on open space and recreation, page 8. The potential impact on future cemetery use in the future should be addressed in detail. The cemetery board recommends the second sentence read, quote, it is noted that the subject site is to be utilized as cemetery use in the future, and all construction and demolition materials removed from the site upon completion of the project and at the conclusion of the lease. for any buildings that will not remain for cemetery use. Number 4, in section 3.1, impacts on transportation, page 8, the potential impact on transportation to adjacent cemeteries should be considered. The cemetery board recommends an additional bullet that states, quote, the proposed action may degrade existing access to areas of cemetery interments west of proposed action across Little East Neck Road and from proposed lot 2. Number 5, in section 3.2, impacts on community services and utilities, page 9. The potential to provide a substantial benefit to the cemetery should be considered. The cemetery board recommends an additional sentence after the penultimate sentence of the paragraph that states, quote, the proposed action is expected to generate significant revenues for Pine Lawn Memorial Park and Arboretum that may be placed in its permanent maintenance fund and used for cemetery projects and renovations. The permanent maintenance fund is used when a cemetery runs out of available interment space to maintain cemetery's appearance and avoid abandonment to and becoming a financial burden on the town, pursuant to Town Law Section 291. Pine Lawn Memorial Park and Arboretum also anticipates retaining some buildings for cemetery purposes at the conclusion of the lease. Finally, Pine Lawn Memorial Park and Arboretum has indicated it may seek cemetery board approval to use a portion of lease proceeds for capital projects, the cost of which it asserts exceeds its available unrestricted funds. Number 6, in section 4.0, proposed format and content of DEIS, subsection 3.2.1, page 13. The analysis of existing conditions should not be limited to proposed lot 2, but should encompass all adjacent cemetery operations. The cemetery board recommends, quote, conduct monitoring of existing ambient sound/noise levels during weekday peak traffic time, cemetery areas with interments west of proposed action across Little East Neck Road, and within lot 2, existing interment area. Number 7, section 4.0, proposed format and content of DEIS, subsection 3.2.2, page 14. The analysis of anticipated impact should not be limited to proposed lot 2, but should encompass all adjacent cemetery operations. The cemetery board recommends, quote, using appropriate mapping and or tables, building plans and elevations, the visual simulations or renderings from several key vantage points, including Little East Neck Road, North 28th Street, the north side of the site looking in, cemetery areas with interments west of proposed action across Little East Neck Road, and from proposed lot 2. Number 8, in section 4.0, proposed format and content of DEIS, subsection 3.4.2, page 15. The analysis of economic impact should include benefits for the cemetery and town through mitigating the chance of cemetery abandonment to the town and the cemetery's planned retention of some buildings. The cemetery board recommends additional language at the end of the sentence stating, quote, impact on Pine Lawn Memorial Park and Arboretum's permanent maintenance fund and associated risk of abandonment to the town of Babylon, buildings retained at the end of the lease for cemetery purposes, and capital projects. Number 9, in section 4.0, proposed format and content of DEIS, subsection 3.5.2, page 15. The analysis of anticipated traffic impact should include an analysis of impacts on visitors to adjacent cemeteries. The cemetery board recommends additional language at the end of the sentence stating, quote, discuss the impacts on visitors to areas of cemetery interments west of proposed action across the Little East Neck Road and the proposed lot 2. Number 10, in section 5.0, extent and quality of information needed, page 17, the references to information sources should include Article 15 of the Not-for-Profit Corporation Law and Chapter 6 of Title 19 of the NYCRR. Number 11, in section 5.0, extent and quality of information needed, objectives of the project sponsor, page 18. The benefits of the proposed action should include a discussion of the benefits to Pine Lawn Memorial Park and Arboretum and its lot owners through additional revenue, retained buildings, and abatement of nuisance, vandalism, and trespass on the property through the proposed action. The cemetery board recommends a new sentence following the last sentence in the second bullet that states, quote, also a discussion of the benefits to Pine Lawn Memorial Park and Arboretum and its lot owners through enhanced revenue for its permanent maintenance fund, capital improvement renovations, retention of some buildings at the conclusion of the lease, and the abatement of nuisance, vandalism, and trespass on undeveloped land. Number 12, in section 5.0, extent and quality of information needed, water resources, parenthetically surface waters, wetlands, and groundwater, page 20. The discussion of mitigation measures should specifically address efforts to avoid impacts on adjacent cemetery operations. The cemetery board recommends the last bullet state, quote, mitigation measures which may reduce potential resource impacts including impacts on adjacent cemetery operations and interments, will be identified. Number 13, in section 5.0, extent and quality of information needed, land use, zoning, and plans, page 21. The discussion of conversion to cemetery use should include consideration that some buildings will be retained for cemetery use at the conclusion of the lease. The cemetery board recommends the fourth bullet state, quote, discuss conformance of proposed project to existing or anticipated future land use and zoning patterns of site and in the area, and discuss the eventual conversion to a cemetery use, including the retention of some buildings for cemetery uses at the conclusion of the lease. Number 14, in section 5.0, extent and quality of information needed, community character, page 21. The discussion of visual community character of the site should specifically reference adjacent cemetery operations. The cemetery board recommends the first bullet point state, quote, using appropriate mapping and photographs, if and as applicable, describe the visual community character of the site and area for observers along roadways, areas of cemetery interments west of proposed action across Little East Neck Road, proposed lot 2, and from other vantage points, end quote. The cemetery board recommends the third bullet state, quote, prepare and discuss visual simulations or renderings of future conditions looking into the site from Little East Neck Road, North 28th Street, north of or from the northerly property line, areas of cemetery interments west of proposed action across Little East Neck Road, and from the existing interment area, proposed lot 2. Number 15, in section 5.0, extent and quality of information needed, economic and fiscal analysis, page 23. The discussion of economic impact should include the benefits to the cemetery and its lot owners. The cemetery board recommends that the penultimate bullet state, quote, identify economic impacts of annual operations, including economic impacts on Pineland Memorial Park and Arboretum and its lot owners. Number 16, in section 5.0, extent and quality of information needed, traffic impact and parking study, page 23. The study of traffic impacts should include an analysis of visitor volume to adjacent cemetery operations. The cemetery board recommends an additional bullet stating, quote, conduct visitor counts to cemetery interment areas west of proposed action across Little East Neck Road and to proposed lot 2, identify peak usage times and identify impacts on these visitors that could have been created by the proposed action and provide mitigations if necessary. Number 17, and section 5.0, extent and quality of information needed, growth-inducing aspects and cumulative impacts, page 25. Pineland Memorial Park and Arboretum's further development of existing cemetery areas west of Wellwood Avenue should be discussed. The cemetery board recommends the first bullet point state, quote, provide brief discussion of those aspects of the proposed project which might trigger or foster additional future growth in the area, including the potential for Pineland Memorial Park and Arboretum to further expand its operations in existing cemetery areas west of Wellwood Avenue. Number 18, in section 6.0, issues deemed not relevant, not environmentally significant, or adequately addressed in prior environmental review, page 27. The conversion of proposed lot 2 to industrial uses in the future is unknown to the cemetery board, and accordingly, the cemetery board disagrees that traffic studies on proposed lot 2 should be treated as industrial. The cemetery board recommends the first paragraph of number 2 be stricken. Part of lot 2 contains burials, and it would be inappropriate to convert an area containing burials to industrial use. Number 19, in section 6.0, issues deemed not relevant, not environmentally significant, or adequately addressed in prior environmental review, page 28. The bulleted list of areas where the traffic impact study will be conducted should include visitor traffic to areas of cemetery interments west of proposed action across Little East Neck Road and proposed lot 2. The only note I will say is that the version of the draft resolution posted referenced Acting Secretary of State Brendan C. Hughes. The draft presented to the board physically right now reflects the new Secretary of State, Walter T. Mosley.
Right. And we have a line for Jill, she won't be voting, so.
Correct.
Okay, so.
But we put all 3 board member signatures on documents even when we know
That's
they're
right,
not going to be signing.
Sort of clarifying, but thank you. Okay, so, and this revised document will be posted on the website? So, right?
The Mosley version, no. We'll post it, we can post it after it's signed for the next meeting.
After it's signed, yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
So I guess I just
Excuse me?
again, if there's anybody that wishes to have any comments on the proposed resolution? Any
Are
further
you
discuss-
accepting public comments?
Public comment,
Are you
yes, I'm asking, public comment on this matter.
If you're ready for me, I'd love to weigh in when you're, if now it's the
Identify
appropriate time.
yourself, please, and,
Sure. Absolutely. My name is Carrie O'Farrell. I am a senior partner with the firm of Nelson, Pope, and Voorhees, and I have been retained by the applicant that is proposing the redevelopment of the 100-acre portion, Bristol, into the Suffolk Technology Park. And we are responsible for the preparation of the draft environmental impact statement. So I just wanted to provide a couple of quick comments with respect to the draft comments you just went through. In general, the comments, make a lot of sense and we appreciate the additions. There are just a couple of items that we wanted to point out as either something that's, already covered within the draft scope. It's limited to 3 areas. And also just a point of clarification for you as well. So with respect to comments numbers 2, 7, and 14, which address the community character and visual impacts, the scoping document already contains, language that specifically requires there to be a visual analysis from vantage points traveled by residents, including areas adjoining the cemetery along Little East Neck Road, and the proposed Lot 2 portion of the Pine Lawn site that would remain as cemetery area. There are some requests to separately include analysis from within the cemetery, if I'm understanding this correctly, from within the existing Pine Lawn Cemetery maintenance area and existing cemetery portion that are on the west side of Little East Neck Road, which we are prepared to discuss those visual impacts and include existing photographs from those locations, but a separate photo simulation from within those areas we believe is not warranted because the scope already requires one along Little East Neck Road, and those 2 properties contain wooded areas that buffer them from existing conditions to Little East Neck Road. So Little East Neck Road, a photo simulation along Little East Neck Road provides a worst case scenario in terms of visual impact. So a additional photo simulation from those 2 locations seems not warranted based on, what's already provided and the existing wooded buffers to remain. Is there any questions related to that? Otherwise, I'll go on to the next.
Go to the next.
Sure. The next 3 comments was comment number 6, which is related to ambient noise monitoring. And there was a comment that indicated that the analysis of existing conditions should not be limited to proposed Lot 2, but should also encompass all adjacent cemetery operations. So there was a request that monitoring of existing ambient noise levels during the weekday peak traffic time, and then it says cemetery areas with interments west of the proposed action across the Little East Neck Road and within Lot 2. For similar reasons as we just discussed, the intention is for there to be, and what's stated in the document itself is that there would be a noise study completed that would include ambient noise monitoring along the property lines. And that assessment basically would evaluate your worst case scenario at the property line. So the assessment would include the potential change to noise impacts and mitigation proposed and how the mitigated impact would relate. If the impact is assessed and mitigated at the property line, a separate analysis again, further away, past wooded buffers, again, is excessive for the same reason. We're evaluating the worst case scenario. So a separate analysis in those locations is not warranted because we would need to mitigate at the property line. Comments number 9 and 16 related to traffic. Again, kind of a similar scenario. The traffic scope already includes a traffic movement count during the weekday and weekend hours for Pine Lawn Road, for Wellwood and Little East Neck. That would include any existing traffic that is generated by the Pine Lawn Cemetery uses. And we would assess the impacts of the proposed project inclusive of that existing traffic generation. There was a note about potential future expansion across across Wellwood Avenue, that the Pine Lawn Cemetery may look to do an expansion in that area, and that would be addressed in the existing scope by as a other planned development. So that would be considered in the existing scope that is before you. And then the last one was just comment number 18, which was related to issues deemed not significant, and a comment that actually came from the town of Huntington related to use of Lot 2 for industrial use. And we just wanted you to, or we're noting a clarification that the response that's in there says that that is, a town of Huntington comment that is not deemed appropriate. So we can't strike that from that portion of the document. We have, the scope is required to identify issues that were brought up but were deemed not appropriate. So that section is written to say that that comment was brought up but is not appropriate. So including comment number 18 is not necessary. That's all I have. And I have this in a letter format. Sorry,
go
one
ahead.
more thing. Yes, I have this in a written format, but I do not have an email address or way to submit it to the board beyond mail. And given the short time frame, mail wasn't going to work. So is there an email address that I can submit this letter or this response formally to the board?
Well, you indicated you represent Bristol Suffolk LLC?
Correct.
Okay. I offhand, I don't know whether or not Bristol Suffolk is considered a member of the public. I mean, all of the comments should be considered by the lead agency, the town, along with the boards as an involved agency. We just heard your comments. What the board will do with them is up to the board. It seems to me the best way to go forward is for the lead agency to consider the comments received and incorporate reasonable requests for information. I'm happy to give you my email address if you want.
I think the purpose of me joining the meeting and just bringing these issues up was if the cemetery board wanted to consider, what is in this letter and what I just stated in a very, quick summary, and modify their comments based on this information, which is relevant. I agree with you that the town will be evaluating any comments received, and we'll do the same thing. We would work. I'm also working on the draft scope and working with the town on the overall seeker matter. So the draft scope would be amended to identify either changes to the scope to address, the comments that you have, and if comments are not relevant, we would include that in, the discussion, of issues not deemed relevant. So it is, perfectly fine to, for that to happen in whatever way you would like. I just wanted to give the board the opportunity of the input of what's already in the document, and if there's an opportunity to make any revisions, do so.
Okay, thank you. In my view, just generally, talking out loud, is that in most of the things you suggested, you're saying that they're not necessary, but they are making the point to the cemetery board of things that we want to be considered. So if they're duplicative, that can be hashed out
Sure.
again by the lead agency. I wouldn't expect that we would make any changes to the resolution at this point. Tom, any thoughts?
Oh, I agree with you.
Okay. So,
Could
thank
I
you for
get
your, yeah,
Could I get
Go ahead.
the email address so that
Sure.
we can submit these formally?
yeah,
I mean, you're welcome to submit them, but the board is not going to consider them at this meeting. And assuming the board goes ahead and approves this resolution now, we don't anticipate having another meeting on this matter unless somebody with standing asks the board to reconsider its determination, bearing in mind that our comments have to be received by the town by May 29th.
I was gonna
And the
say,
board isn't going to meet again until June 11th.
right, so we're working under timeframes. But no, I don't have any objection to getting the comments, do you, Rob?
No.
So the Division of Cemeteries has a generic email. It's probably the easiest way to send it. It's just cemeteries, plural, at D as in David, O as in Oscar, S as in Sam, .ny.gov.
Perfect. And we appreciate you, making making a special meeting and putting together the comments quickly within the time frame. It's certainly appreciated. There was, a lot of good input that we saw in the letter. So, I want to thank the
you.
board, and I should have started with that.
Yep, no, appreciate the comments. Any other parties wishing to address the board? And members of the public, I guess, address the board? Okay, so I think we've received the comments. I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the resolution as read by our council. Next time we're gonna have a marathon, we'll have handoffs and get divided up, so nobody gets too tired. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, so all in favor? Aye. The resolution is approved as read and as will be posted on our website. Thank you for that. Are there any other issues that need to come before the board? If not, I'll make a motion to adjourn the special meeting of the cemetery board. Our next regular meeting is July 11th.
June 11th.
June 11th, sorry. Time flies.